All right. Thank you, Jake, for joining us. So, you guys,
Yeah.
today we're talking to Jake Heilbrunn, who's in Encinitas, just north of San Diego, and he is an author, a best-selling author, a TED Talk speaker, and a mental health advocate who's really passionate about helping teens deal with anxiety and all kinds of good things. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're into?
Yeah. Well, you gave a good brief overall summary. So kind of everything stemmed from my journey, which was starting out in college, which we'll dive into more, and really just developing severe anxiety to the point where I was breaking out in hives and rashes all over my body. And really what got me so passionate about like speaking about, mental health is I got home after I went on this like healing journey, and it seemed that I started digging in, and there's like millions of young people who are feeling the exact way I did. I mean, if you look at the statistics of like anxiety, especially, but also depression, suicide, they've like skyrocketed, especially among youth, like age 15 to 22. And I thought it was insane because like I was experiencing this, and no one really talked about it with social media. Like everyone's got their highlight reels and whatnot. So that got me super passionate. So I do a lot of speaking in high schools and colleges about mental health and replacing anxiety with purpose and just opening up that conversation. So yeah, that's what I'm super passionate about,
So
and
many
also
questions.
helping.
So cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lot of,
No,
but
that's perfect. Well, one thing that, so you guys should all go watch his TED Talk. It's really amazing. And I'll be posting links and stuff to some of his articles. But one thing you said in an interview that I thought was so fascinating is that, you had this debilitating anxiety, but it seems like you saw a counselor 5 times or thereabouts, right? And that
mhm.
did tremendous amounts for you. And I'm interested to hear, because there are some people where you can kind of go in and deal with the issue fairly quickly. Some people end up dealing with anxiety their entire lives. What do you think made it so impactful for you, and how did you work through it so quickly?
Yeah, so to give some context, I was a freshman at Ohio State University. So I was across the country, didn't really know anyone in this new state. And 3 days after getting there, I'm breaking out in hives and rashes all over my body, have no idea why. And just for the first, like anxiety was just a word to me, right? Like it became this sensation, this like ball that would roll up in my throat. And so it was also new to me, and no one really prepared me for it. I didn't know anything like this before. And I think there were so many other things, and I know tons of other young people feel this as well, this insane pressure to have your life figured out. So I felt like I needed to know exactly what I was doing, and I would always be like convincing myself of, trying to ensure that what I was doing like looked right or felt right to other people. And so I initially didn't see this counselor for mental health stuff, although it was what I needed. But
Right.
she was a career counselor. And of course, the career counselors, or at least at Ohio State, they were trained, of course, in helping in other areas of therapy. So I just started like basically talking. She was brilliant. She was just kind of like letting me speak. And I remember, first it was, what do I want to do? But then it very quickly just enveloped into just like all this stuff that I was dealing with, that I was hiding and not telling anyone. And I just cried. And I never had, I can't remember the last time I cried, like, as a 17-year-old guy, like you don't cry.
Right.
And so I just broke down, and like, at first I just remember like not like almost like covering my face, or like she's like, you're like allowed to cry. That's like what this whole this is like the safe container.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's kind of like the classic, I was going in there for what I thought, what I wanted, but she was helping me dive into what I needed to get off my chest. And so that spawned, then of course I've kind of like built a relationship of trust with her, where I would come back. And again, it was like we were diving into career stuff, but pretty much every time it was like getting to go deeper into what's causing this severe anxiety, how to process it, how to deal with it, learning like mindfulness techniques, and really just helping me see my fears and thoughts and anxiety for what it was, and kind of creating or asking those evoking questions that would give me kind of insight into who I was and where this was all stemming from.
It's such an interesting thing that we have this cultural script that we're supposed to have it figured out by the time we're 17 or 18 years old, what we're going to do with our whole lives. And I remember one of the worst days for me was the day I turned 20. And I felt like, oh
Really?
my, yeah, because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like I had these expectations that I was supposed to be already wildly successful somehow. I guess we see all these like young celebrities making a lot of money, and I was in the arts at that time. So I was like, I should be doing that. And so I turned 20 and had this like, I felt like a midlife crisis when I was 20 years old. But it's so funny because honestly, I don't really know very many 20-year-olds or 17-year-olds that know anything about what they want to do. And I know you talk
Yeah,
about that a lot, like finding your passion, your purpose. I feel like it takes some people a lifetime.
yeah. It's probably one of my biggest passions is like talking about this, and part of it is because like I went through such a crisis myself, and I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Manson,
Yeah.
the author and the writer. He's
Yeah,
got
he's
this
awesome.
great article. It's called "The Seven Strange Questions to Help You Find Your Life Purpose." And I remember like he's like I've read it clearly too many times to count, but he starts he's like, when my brother was like 7, he stated that he was going to be a congressman, and he's like, and then he proceeded to do all that. Now he's like 30. He's like, don't get me wrong, my brother's a freak. Like not many people are like this,
Yeah.
and I definitely was not like that. I think, it's really interesting, like how we were talking about, is today in today's youth, and ever since the prevalence of social media, there has, I think, just been this new like weight of pressure and feeling because it's like, you know, whether you're conscious of it or not, it's kind of happening where we're always comparing ourselves. And I'm speaking on behalf of like myself and
Sure.
everyone that I know who's like, even in like a 5 to 7 year gap, and anywhere, and I'm 21, so anyone younger than me, it's like almost, and it's kind of scary, but it seems like the younger, the more intensified it is
Yeah.
because the younger generation grew up with all these things even more intensified. So I think it's this comparison game where you feel like you're looking at people and it's like this race because people are ahead, and ahead means could be more Instagram followers, or ahead could mean they post more pictures smiling by sunset, so you think they're like happier. And it's this
Yeah.
game that we're all kind of almost subscribing to without even realizing that no one knows what that actual human being is feeling. It's just like this digital game. And I think it creates a lot of pressure. And of course, adding on the components of like family pressures, a lot of people, and you have this pressure of your family. It's like you're doing this, there's no choice. So some kids, it's like, well, you're either doing that or you're on your own. And so there's that pressure. And then there's, of course, all the silent battles of the things that we don't even know each other dealing with, whether they're health issues or just other issues. And I think, when you stack all those together, and then you're again always seeing other people, it's like, well, if I don't have it figured out, then what's wrong with me? It's like there's this feeling that
Yeah.
you're not enough, or you're never going to be good enough unless you have it figured out. And then it also has to look good, right? So
Right.
it's, if you wanted to study rocks, and that's like your biggest passion, but that doesn't look as cool as being like, I don't know, like a model or whatever.
Sure.
So I think it's just like all those things, and it almost can sound ridiculous, but I know for me, like it was very real for me playing, all those like thoughts, and it feels so real.
Yeah, well, I never thought about it in that sense before, but yeah, before if you were passionate about rocks, you didn't have to even think about how that would look for other people because there was no real window into your life. Most of the time, it was the people that you actually had FaceTime with that would know what you were up to. But now it's like, not only do we have to figure out what we want to do, but we have to dress it up and make it look a certain way so that other people, it's like we want other people to be interested in what we're doing in this way that I don't think has ever happened in human history.
Yeah.
And so you talk
Yeah.
to a lot of younger people, right? Like high schoolers in particular.
Yeah. A lot of college kids as well.
Okay. And, I'm in my 30s, so you guys are probably dealing with this even more than my generation because Facebook came out when I was in college and it took our campus by storm, and everyone suddenly was just like, "Oh my God, this is the coolest thing. You have to be, you have to be on it." It was when you still had to have a .edu extension on your email to even have an
No
account.
way.
Yeah, so I've really seen this whole thing evolve. And I think people my age are definitely very much impacted by it, but it's not quite as extreme as, I have cousins that are in high school now, and I think they get stressed out about how many likes they get and, how many followers they have. What are some of the things that you're seeing as you're talking to these people?
Yeah, well, that's a huge one. And, I have a younger sister, and I think girls, I mean, it's interesting. My older sister seemed to somehow she just never got involved in a lot of the drama, which I was like, I mean, as a brother, that's always nice to see. Not that my little sister doesn't, but I think her generation just has it more intense. But I think especially with looks, there's this pressure to look a certain way, and with the likes, the validation. I mean, I feel that too, where it's like you want to get the likes, and it's the guy who made Instagram. He majored in computer science and psychology, so
Right.
it's programmed to make us want these things. But in terms of how it affects kids, I always just find it interesting. I'll go and speak, and then always after there's some kids who want to chat, and it's sometimes the conversations with these kids that it's just these are kids that it's a mix. Some kids are sharing their own struggles, but then there's also these kids, and sometimes they'll reach out after via email or DM or something. And you wouldn't think these are the kids who are maybe having these issues. Again, not that it's to judge, but it's they seem to be athletic or whatever and have friends, but it's just understanding that everyone has their own unique things they're working through, and it's not necessarily just about the likes and those things, but it's some people almost feel like they have to put this image and hide because they're real, or share something, whether it's their parents or their friends, they just won't be liked for certain things. And it's really severe. I mean, we're working in our business with a client, and his 14-year-old kid committed suicide 3 months ago, and there's a documentary called Race to Nowhere about all these pressures, and a lot about it's about getting into college, especially in these competitive high schools. It's this feeling of, if I don't get into Harvard, I'm a failure. Literally, that is, and it sounds ridiculous, but when you're a kid, when you're 16 and you're just in that environment, it really is your world. You don't know any difference, and it's just really sad because, and it's all, a lot of what I try and make a difference in is talking to parents too, because I think the parents need to hear this message much, if not more, because it's they're kind of creating the pressure on the kid to have everything figured out, and that's not helping the kid.
No. It's certainly not.
And with the modern day college, it's there's so many. I mean, you don't a degree is amazing if it's what you want to do, but there's also kids who have different interests and different ways to make careers, and so it's that forced pressure. Kids feel stuck and trapped, and if they don't feel good on that path, that's where the unfortunate areas of self-harm can come into play, because they don't feel like there's a way out.
Glad you brought up parents, because you said something in an interview I thought was really, really important, that people don't talk about that often, or at least I don't hear it that often. And it's that, if you're worried about your kids being worried or stressed, or you're stressed about your kids' stress, it doesn't help, which when you say it out loud seems pretty, intuitive, but I see a lot of parents freaking out about stuff, and then their kids freak out. And what are some of the other things that you counsel parents on, and some of the key things that you feel like we can be doing to help children not face this in this extreme way?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting. It's when you when you think about inspiration, it's never, yes, it's what someone says, but it's the energy behind them. It's how they're being.
Yeah.
So, when I look at if a parent, I mean, I think if they can say it, it's amazing. But if they can truly love their kid without the condition of little Johnny's going to Harvard, and say, you know what, if you work hard and you pursue what you're passionate about and you give it all you got, I support you. Even those things. And I know, who am I to say? I'm not a parent, but I do know, I've talked with so many kids who are yeah, but it's my mom or dad has the plan for me. And knowing that, I think it is a lot of ego with a lot of parents. I'm not going to say all of them, because of course that's not the case, but certain parents, it's like they have this expectation of their kid, and I think that expectation can be really unhealthy. So I think one thing is it's having an open conversation of like, because I think from the kid's standpoint, they need to understand that their parent just wants them to be safe and successful. And so the way the parent is communicating that to the child is, you have to do this. And that's creating this like friction when there's a way to go about the conversation where like both sides can win, where the kid understands like, okay, of course I need to work hard and like learn how to provide for myself and be safe. And the parent can also know that there's a different way to communicate that than saying you need to do X, Y, and Z. So I think just like having an open conversation and coming from a place, the parent coming from a place of first understanding, because I think a lot of parents don't know like what it's like to be a kid in this day and age.
Sure.
And not to say that it's any harder than it was years ago. There's always just new times and new pressures, but like a lot of parents seem to have a disconnect to know what it's like to be a kid in this day and age with the social media pressures and the feelings of being like this intense anxiety and depression that's resulting from all this external pressure. And so just that conversation, I think, is like a first piece when the kid knows the parent's coming from a place of like understanding and love, and then can kind of say like, work hard, but like first coming from the place of like, I hear you, I see you.
Yeah. It's funny you say, I'm not a parent, what do I know? But I honestly think in some ways we need to be having more conversations. You know, parents need to be having conversations with people who have recently been parented, because it's really fresh on their mind what helped them and what didn't help them and what motivated and inspired them and what made them feel, you know, stressed out. And I think in some ways that needs to be happening a lot. And I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
And gosh, there are so many different directions we could go right now. There's a lot of things I want to ask you about. Just in the realm of, you know, growing up, feeling pressure with social media and these expectations that we're supposed to know what we're doing. You know, what do you tell people when they're truly clueless? Like, you know, I have this feeling that there's something I'm supposed to be doing, or there's something that's going to light me up and I don't know what it is. You know, it seems like you managed to figure what you're passionate about out pretty quickly, relatively speaking. You know, I didn't know what I was doing when I was 21.
I love this question because it's like, it's a never ending journey, at least in my experience. Like I had a huge breakthrough with my business partner yesterday, where I had been, and like, I think one of the things, I'm just super self-aware. So like, it's like, I always notice, I'm very like in tune with when things are kind of not feeling 100% aligned. But the hard part is, and I think everyone feels it, like, you know, when something's not right, but it's, what do you do with that feeling? So when you are feeling lost or hopeless or clueless, it's like, I think the first part is actually acknowledging the feeling. So I had like a coaching session on Tuesday, which like I think helped catalyze the breakthrough yesterday. And it was the first time, like, I just admitted to her that I wasn't super excited about the work I was doing. You know, worked really hard to like build this company, and a lot of other things are going really well. But if I was honest, it was like the day to day, and why that was scary for me to admit, because my mind was going to all these places of, well, if this is true, then, you know, we're going to split up. Our business is going to, like, all these things. So I'm like, well, it's either this or that. And so I think that's one thing, you know, it's called catastrophizing. It's like when our mind, you know, like has a fear, and like, you just like, it goes to like the worst horizons, and then you just talk about it. So the first, I think, is acknowledging whatever you're feeling without judging, without trying to find a solution. Is just like, okay, you feel lost. Amazing. Like, what does that feel like to feel lost? What is that making you feel like? You know, how does that feel in your body? Like, just like feeling the feeling, because I think we're so quick to try and find the solution, or but to just acknowledge it. And then I think acknowledging it kind of with that is like having someone to speak to. So when I was lost, and this was in my TED Talk, and I still do this to this day, is she basically asked me what's the worst thing and the best thing that could happen. And I think you don't have to do that on one decision, but like write everything on your head. Okay, like, here are 7 options for me. Let's write the pros and cons for each, because just the process of getting it out of your head is so freeing, because you see your thoughts and fears for what they are. Because like for me, when I ended up dropping out of college, and hopping on a one-way flight to Guatemala, which sounds crazy, but if you actually think about it, really, and I didn't know Spanish, and I was like 18, it was just an unknown, which is so scary, but it's really like I was just going to a place to teach English in a place I'd never been. But when I was in school, this idea was, I thought I was just going to die. It was just death, or
Yeah.
I'm going to be on the streets for the rest of my life in some foreign country, never, and my parents will never hear of me again. Like the odds of those things happening, but just writing it out. So I think
Yeah.
that's really good. And then a lot of things too. I mean, I feel like because I left college, I've tried so many different things, and I think that's really helpful. Is just experiment. If you want to write, like I remember in college when I was feeling super lost and anxious, confused, I started a soccer blog. I loved soccer, played my whole life, and then I loved writing, and I just started writing, and I did like 4, it wasn't that many, but then I kind of became aware that I loved to write and like wanted to pursue writing, but I had built up this story in my head of, but writers aren't successful and you can't make a living as a writer. So I was like, well, what do I do now? And then of course, I went on to write a book, and I published like 60 blog posts and all these things, but it was first started with like, whoa, like I actually really like writing. And I never thought by doing those soccer blog, I don't do the soccer blog today or blog about soccer, but it was like that, just trying and giving myself permission to try something new really opened the doors. So I think, writing down a list, what are 10 things that I'm curious about? And that could even just be something simple like I remember the first business book I ever read was on Howard Schultz about Starbucks, like how they thrived during the recession. I was just curious about business, and that book taught me about like the ethics, like how he made an ethical decision. That's like how they succeeded. I'll always remember that. But it was because I just was like, well, what's it like to like run a business? I had no idea. So I picked up a book. And then another thing I think is super important is identifying role models, and getting clear on the qualities of these people. And that's actually how I started working with my business partner. At first I was his assistant, was like I literally wrote down 3 of my role models. I wrote down Jack Canfield, Adam Braun, and Taylor Conroy. And I noticed like a lot of these guys, they're big philanthropists. They've started big movements. They've been writers or speakers, like all these like traits, and travelers. And I'm like, wow, all these like, because when you write down these people, you'll notice those common threads. And then saying, maybe there's a way that I can interview this person or read their content or just learn from them or offer to work for them for free, especially if you're trying to get like a job or starting out or shift careers. I find that I've learned and gotten so many opportunities from either working for free or just working for someone that I look up to, because it's, and then the craziest thing is the lesson is never actually the work itself, but it's like being around a person who inspires you. Like the lessons in life and happiness and fulfillment are like 10x anything you could ever imagine. So those are kind of a couple things that have worked for me.
That's awesome. I love that. Now, what do you guys do now? What is your business?
So we help people with messages that can impact humanity get on the TEDx stage. So we help them land the talk, get coached, and then we help them spread the talk. So my Taylor Conroy, he's my business partner, and my TED Talk came out a month ago, but he gave his one 7 years ago, and it led to funding over $4 million to build over 500 schools, water projects, libraries, anti-sex trafficking work in 15 plus developing countries around the world, like literally all from his TED Talk. 15,000 people have fundraised, and he's helped tons of people, other guys who'd never done a public speech before or a paid speaking gig. This guy now literally travels the world speaking about depression. His TED Talk is called Confessions of a Depressed Comic. And now he raised millions of dollars for the Bell Let's Talk campaign. So it's like helping people with these messages, like, get it out. And so they can like literally shift humanity and get to do what they love. It's like this fusion. And so that's what lights us up, is like helping people who have these messages, like get them out in a big, meaningful way.
That's so cool. I need to check that out, by the way.
Yeah. Totally.
That sounds pretty interesting. One thing I'm interested in, I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, actually. We have the relationship with technology is very interesting, because things like TED, the ability to have these long form conversations through podcasts, they are, I think, changing humanity in a positive way. And yet we also have these things like social media and, fake news and all these other things that technology is creating that is generating a huge amount of anxiety and tension. And I don't really know what we do with that, right? Like, what are some of the trends that you're seeing do you think that social media is going to ultimately become a more transparent platform where people are sharing both sides? I mean, I know I certainly do that, and I have friends that are engaged in doing that, but it seems like it's still the vast minority of what people are doing.
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's kind of like, I think the question that a lot of people are wondering. And I think just like a lot of things, it's kind of a yin and a yang, where there's, artificial intelligence is going to do amazing things, but there's also this very dark side of it that we have to be aware of. And with social media, I think it's just about being conscious. And what I mean by that is, I think there's going to be always, like, moving forward, social media is now ingrained in our life, like, period.
Yeah. Like
and if anything,
Pandora's
it's going to increase.
box can't be closed
Yeah,
again,
it's
right?
just like, it's a part of our reality. And of course, there are people who like don't do anything with it, and that's amazing. But if you're listening to this, or like, you're probably using social media to some extent. And my generation and generations moving forward, there's the rare kids who won't be using it, and all power to them. But the people who are using it, I think it's just conscious usage of it. So you can be immersing yourself in negative content and using social media in like a negative way. I think in a way it is kind of like, it's not a mirror, but it's if you're feeling this need to always be validated, then social media is an outlet for that to be happening in your physical reality. But really, it's something deep within that you get to work through and see where that's coming from. So it's like, that's why I say being conscious. It's like, am I posting content to spread a message, or just speak my truth, or just like share fun memories? You don't have to make every post a 9-paragraph essay like I used to do. But you can just like share your life, but being conscious that you're using the tool, not letting the tool use you. And also you use it for good. I mean, my life changed from an Instagram post because this guy I was inspired by posted about this trip to Mexico, and I ended up going on it and won a free trip to Mexico. And then I met my mentor on the trip. So like, and then we were building homes in Mexico. So it can be used for these beautiful ways. And I also used to follow people that would make me like jealous. And I was like, why am I following this person? Like, they don't make me feel good about myself. So I just hit unfollow. But it was like, oh, but like maybe they won't like me if I unfollow, like that whole conversation.
Yeah.
And so it's just that, again, like, that quote by Jim Rohn, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I think it's equally as true on social media. Who are the 5 people you're seeing their content the most? And are those people making you feel good about yourself? Are they inspiring you? So I think it's just using social media in a way that's going to serve you, serve your growth, serve what makes you happy. And ideally, like, connecting with people like yourself who like want to change the world and want to forward a conversation and growth in a positive way.
Do you think there's any conversation happening in the schools themselves? Because I think if you could use social media as a sort of personal growth tool and as this mirror, okay, why is this triggering me? Why is this making me feel this way? How am I not being true to myself? All these kinds of things. It could be a really beautiful growth tool for somebody, especially a young person, navigating all of this and figuring out who they are. But they wouldn't necessarily intuitively know that, right? That they have access to this tool. And so are schools stepping in? Or, I mean, obviously you're going and speaking, so I'm sure that helps quite a bit. But I would really love to see some systems actually getting put in place in our education system where kids they even have access to that way of looking at it.
Totally. I think it's a huge opportunity. And it's also so new, like it just happened so fast that I don't think schools have even created like a curriculum for it, because I think there totally should be. It's like when you're 4, it's like there needs to be like classes on using like what social media is and how to be conscious of it. And also like I believe there should just also be time with like zero social media. It's like you get in the class, you put your phone in this like box, and it's like, nope, like not for a couple hours, or, creating the boundaries, because it is a part of our reality. It's almost like equally as real in a way. There's like your real life, and then there's your social media life, because kids are spending like on average like 4 to 5 hours of their day on social media.
Yeah, I've read that.
So that is a lot of time. And if you're not understanding this game, because in some way it is a game of the likes, the comparison, the, kind of time wasting, if you do, like there just needs to be some instruction. So I haven't seen it in like many schools as like a curriculum, but I think the coolest thing is it's up to, in many ways, the teacher themselves. I've talked with some amazing teachers who actually do like mindfulness guided meditations through like Headspace with their class, and
Nice.
teachers who show like TEDx talks to their class. So there are like positive things being done. I think it's just like this new frontier. So I hopefully there
Yeah.
will be like a curriculum.
What's interesting though, I feel like we've created this culture and the way that technology is going, it's this exponential growth. And so we're creating social change at such a rapid pace. And then we have these systems that can't really keep up with it. And so I don't know. I feel like we're sort of at this precipice of massive educational shifts as well. People like yourself, did you actually go back and finish school?
No, I never went back to college, and
Yeah.
you know, I think it is interesting, and I get asked this, and at first I used to be really uncomfortable because I didn't want to tell, like I always was like, oh, I'm being asked every time I'd go to high school, speak at a high school, and I was like 19 when I was doing this, and I didn't, not that I have my stuff figured out now, but like I felt like I was just this kid on a mission to like get this book out to the world and speak about my experiences that I felt like no one was talking about.
Yeah.
But I would always feel awkward when there was like a parent or kid would be like, so like, are you back in school? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, no. And it's not like my message is not for kids to drop out,
Yeah.
but it's also not to not drop out if that's what you feel called to do. I think we're in this amazing time where college does not define who you are, maybe like it used to be back then where you kind of needed a degree.
Yeah.
It's really more about building a foundational set of skills and I think a mindset more than anything. And I realized I wanted to be a writer and speaker and get involved in business and kind of live this life that I didn't even think was possible. And I just started learning about people who were like using the internet for cool things. And I said, this is like, I remember being in college and I felt so, it was like I really genuinely didn't feel like I was learning anything. I was paying so much money to sit in a class with 200 kids and learn about a graph that you had no idea what the graph was for. And it was like this. And then after the test, I would literally forget everything. So, of course, that was my personal experience. I have friends who've gotten a lot of value from it, but I think a college degree is much less important today. Like you certainly don't need it. I think there's a million ways to get your foot in the door. If you want to be a doctor, you should probably go, or a lawyer, or a couple of the things. But
Yeah.
if you're really unsure and you're spending all this money, I think there is a happy medium, or at least taking a year off and working. I think I knew I wasn't going to go back to college, but I filed for like a leave of absence, so I knew I had the option to come back if I wanted to. But I've found that working for people that like inspire me and kind of just learning by doing more and kind of messing up and just learning as I go fits my learning style much better than like the traditional classroom.
Yeah, I really get that. I dropped out for a year myself in between my sophomore and junior
Really?
year. Yeah, part of it was just mental health driven. My eating disorder was really gnarly, and I couldn't keep up with my class schedule and stuff like that. But it was also partially because I wanted to pursue music, and I went back and recorded some tracks and worked with a producer and did all of that. And that was a really important part of my path. And it helped me kind of realize, maybe that isn't exactly what I want to do. I had this idea in my head about music and what it was going to be like. And it was a really positive experience. But, I realized I wanted to go back and study psychology.
Wow. And I'm so curious, when you did take your leave of absence or potential dropout,
Yeah.
what was your mindset? Like, were you excited about it? Were you like ashamed about it?
Both, I think, partially because I had the eating disorder stuff going on and I didn't really talk to people about that. So a couple of my professors knew what was going on and my parents knew what was going on, but my friends did not at all. And I did a pretty good job of hiding all of that. So part of the shame came from that, but I also felt pretty strongly, I did end up going back and I do use my degree now, but I could have learned that stuff elsewhere too. It wouldn't necessarily have been a deal breaker for me and what I'm doing if I hadn't gone back. But I don't know, I felt very strongly that I needed to go have some life experience and that the sort of rigid structure of college life wasn't going to be it for me. And even though, I did go back, I really needed that time to just kind of like do my own thing. And I really wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I ask because I get a lot of messages from kids who either have taken leave or want to. And I know this for myself is like I felt so ashamed at the time. And like me leaving was the best possible thing for my health and my life. Like truly, even if I went back, I needed space. But I felt like the biggest loser. I was like, I felt like hiding from my friends. I felt like this kid who like couldn't handle college, had this skin condition, and was just being like a baby about it and just like couldn't do it like the way I was supposed to. It was, you hear, you go to 4 years and you graduate and then you get the job. And I was like not going on the track that I'm supposed to be on. And so many other kids I've talked to feel the same way where they're taking leave and it's like this big secret. They're like not telling anyone. And that was the same with me. Like I've literally felt so embarrassed telling people like, I literally didn't tell anyone I was going to Guatemala to like only a couple people because they're going to be like, what are you doing? You're throwing away your life? Like, I was so scared of those questions. And it's just really interesting because a lot of people carry shame around that. And I think I'm trying to be like, no, like if that's what feels right to you, like go do it. And the funny thing is, I think there's a lot of kids, for the people who are hiding it, they would actually inspire other people. But it's like in this moment, you feel like you're not going down what's the cool thing. And it can be really just like scary, a lot of negative self-talk and all those things.
Absolutely. I come from a very academic family where like lots of PhDs, lawyers, that kind of stuff. And nobody ever did what I did, I don't think, in my family before or since. And so there was definitely some of that, like, okay, this is what's expected of me. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to go to grad school. I'm supposed to do all these things. And it takes a lot to step outside of that. But I also think, it's interesting looking back on it. I can't really remember what gave me the sort of gumption to just do it. But, I feel like maybe it's just my own sort of feedback loop where I'm sort of looking for this type of thing. But it seems like kids are getting more adventurous. And I think that is one maybe positive aspect of Instagram. You see all these travel photos and people exploring the world, and that used to be reserved for a select few people, and now it seems like it's pretty accessible for a lot of people. So I'd love to hear you talk about Guatemala.
Yeah, so, and I love that too, because back then it's like you have to be like a Nat Geo photographer, and today it's like, you could pretty much get free hotel stays by like doing certain things. So, for me, for travel, for example, I like, again, similar to you, like I didn't have no one in my family did anything remotely like this. Like both my mom and dad went to Ivy League. My sister's like 4-year honor student, works for an accounting company. So like, it was not like there was this adventurous route. But I've always been curious and fascinated by the world. And for me, what called out to me was I wanted something completely different than anything I knew. I just felt this need to experience a different way of life, like drastically different. And I thought Ohio would be different. I grew up in San Diego, but I realized what I needed. It was very different. And I felt like this need or this yearning for a culture that completely different. And I wanted to get away from my phone. So I didn't bring a cell phone on my trip, and I wanted to volunteer and get to know a local community and really be immersed. So I found this amazing organization called Workaway, and essentially what it is, I don't know if you've ever heard of woofing. No. It's like you can work on an organic farm a couple hours a day, and they'll pay for your like room and board. So you don't make money, but you're staying for free. So it's kind of like the same concept, but it's not just for farming. It's for, you could be teaching English. You could be working in like a coffee plantain. You could be working at a scuba shop and helping who's like everything under the sun. And it's in like 160 countries around the world. Wow. And so I found this and I was like, because I was also in college, I'm like, how am I going to afford this? Like I'd never traveled, didn't really know how to do this. So I eventually took my leap of faith to leave college, came home, and I had like $2,000. So I worked a little bit. So by the time I left, I had $4,000 in my bank account, and I found this Workaway profile. It said, whatever your skill set may be, the people of Petén need your help. And Petén is this like northern district in Guatemala. And it said basically like live in this shack next to this local family in a town where like no one speaks English. And it's just something about it called out to me. So I reached out to the guy, He's like, perfect, come on over. So I booked my flight that left in a month on a one-way ticket. And the instructions to get to this town were literally the most same thing in the world. It was like, and this guy, I write about in my book in a different name, but he spent 8 years in hostage and recovery in the special forces, like craziest life story, survived an IED explosion, like walked from Afghanistan to like Iraq, was it? I remember, like, so like to him, like when he sent me the instructions looking back, like to him it's like no big deal, but for me, I'm like an 18-year-old kid who has no idea what he's doing. I speak 3 words of Spanish. So he's like, when you get to Guatemala, just like take a taxi to the bus station, then buy this 9-hour bus to this town, and then take a tuk-tuk here, and then ask for Krista Gringo when you get to town, because like, you know, there's only one small Wi-Fi cafe, and you don't have a phone, so you can't reach me anyways. And I'm just like, okay. Like, I literally didn't know any better, but part of me is like, wait, what? But I also wasn't like thinking that deep in. I'm like, oh, like this is just how you get there. So it ends up taking me like 30 hours to get to this town, because our bus got pulled over on the side of the road 2 hours into it.
Yeah.
Because it's like all these things are happening, but I eventually like make it. And yeah, it was amazing. So then 2 days after I get there, we spend a week trekking through these ancient ruins in the jungle, and I'd like never been camping before. So it's really just diving into the full end and just saying yes to these experiences. But the cool part was like living in the shack with a couple of volunteers next door to this family and teaching English every day to a group of 4th grade kids who literally didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Spanish. But it was one of the most amazing experiences. Played a lot of soccer, which was great to like communicate. Nice. And I think why I picked Guatemala, and because I get asked this all the time, it's like part of the answer is I don't know. Like it could have been like Ecuador.
Sure.
But I think for me, it was like I wanted a developing country that was very different culture. I wanted to learn Spanish. And something about Guatemala, like I'd read about it, I'd seen a documentary about it, and it just kind of was like, okay, cool, like Guatemala. Yeah. But it was just like, firstly, it called out to me because of the different reasons. And so,
and it's
magical. That's kind of how I ended up there. It is magical. Oh yeah, because actually you've been to Lake Atitlan, which I was there as well.
Yeah, I just went there. And I had a similar experience where you get to the town on the bumpiest road of all time, and there's no address. Like the houses don't have addresses. It's just like, oh, it's that house. And so you actually have to talk to people to figure out where you're going. And we've created a civilization so that we don't have to talk to each other in a sense. It's like you get your GPS out and you know exactly where it is. You don't have to ask anyone for directions. And there, if you want to figure out where's the ATM, where's this, where's that, you actually have to stop and talk to a stranger and figure it out. And it was a really wonderful experience.
That's so funny. I was reminded of that. I'm like, wow, why is it so weird? Because like, you're right, out and about, people don't talk to each other as much. And I locked my keys in my car after I went surfing the other morning.
Oh, no.
And so I'm this kid like in a bathing suit, and there was like not many other surfers around for some reason. So I just like went up to a couple people, and I had to like get past this fear. I'm like, hi, can I please use your cell phone? Like I locked my keys in my car to call AAA. But I was like, why did that feel like uncomfortable? It's like you're just talking to a human being, but it's like we're so used to like never needing to talk to someone. And in those countries, it's like much more communally focused.
Yeah, very true. And I'm curious to know, through that experience, how did it shape your perception of what you wanted your life to look like going forward? Just being in this community, I know like you've talked about just like having like actual interactions with people, and like just the joy of not checking your phone 70 times a day. You know, how has that shaped your life now?
Yeah, that was like the domino effect, I think, that really led to everything in the way I still think today. And I think the first part and why it was so valuable as an 18-year-old was, you know, you grow up and you kind of think the world's a certain way. You're programmed however you grow up. And so for me, one of the biggest takeaways was how you don't, like, for me, what was making me happy, I lived out of a backpack for 4 months with like 4 shirts. And I was genuinely the happiest I had been in God knows how long. Like I went from severe anxiety to like literally dreading every day, to my body literally breaking out in hives and rashes, to being the most stoked kid ever who probably hadn't looked in the mirror for like months at a time. And I was like living out of a backpack and doing things and learning from people that maybe I would have judged in the past, but I realized like this, I was happy with so little. And I think where I grew up, it was kind of like impressed upon to like, work hard, get a really high paying job that makes you sound and look cool and have a nice car and a big house. And I was like, but I'm like actually happy. So understanding, and not just like in theory, but like literally experiencing the happiness of just a backpack. It gave me this freedom to say there's literally no reason to not go after the thing that I want in life, because I know now that I can literally be happy living out of my backpack, and I'll always make it work, even if I have to. And so that practical knowingness is a game changer, because it's like that's the worst case for me is really not even a worst case, because I know it's like I was so happy during that time. So I think that was huge. And then another big one was just understanding how there are so many different ways to live your life. When in university, everyone's kind of on the same track. In high school, everyone's on the same track. And then I got here, and I'm reading people who like live in the jungle, meeting these volunteers from like the Netherlands and these places. I'm like, you've been traveling the world for 6 years? Like, what? Like, yeah, like, and then meeting someone else who like worked from their laptop. Like, to me at the time, I didn't even know these things were possible. So I was like ignited with the sense of life can truly be what you make it. And, it's just opened my mind in the biggest way. And then from the social media thing, a big thing was, I think I've always struggled with what people think about me. And I believe like we're the perfect messengers for the thing we struggle most with.
Totally.
And so my whole story, book, like my overarching message is basically having the courage to follow your intuition. And why that was so hard for me is because I care so much about what people think of me. So I didn't want to let people down, and I didn't want to be seen as this thing. But without having social media, it gave me this connection and understanding of myself and like what really, really mattered. So I think another big takeaway was like, wow, when I really want clarity, scrolling on Instagram, probably not going to like find it to a certain extent.
Right.
And just knowing that, the human connection, the connection with myself through meditation and other means, I can always take a break from the phone to kind of like get clarity on the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I had kind of a similar experience. I went to South Africa for not as long. I was there for 6 weeks and doing a sort of teaching English in a very, very rural part of, or I guess it wasn't that rural, but it was outside of Cape Town. And I was older, and I had been working at a web tech company, and I went and did that. And then I came back. And the idea of sitting at a cubicle after watching these people like have a very, very, very different way of living their lives, I couldn't do it anymore. Absolutely couldn't do it. And so I had to sort of take the plunge and quit my job and figure out what came next. But I think there is something just irreplaceable about that experience of immersing yourself in another culture and realizing that, I think American culture has infiltrated a lot of other places, but there are still places that are almost completely untouched by it. And if you get to go there and see that, it really can alter your perspective in a pretty incredible way.
Totally. And I think especially like when you are in a phase or period of your life where you are uncertain, or you just feel lost, or you're not knowing what's next. And it doesn't have to be travel. It just so happens that travel literally puts your physical body in a different environment, and your environment shapes every single thing that you think about. So if you're in a physical environment that's different, you're going to start thinking different thoughts, which will give you new insights. So that's why it's so powerful. It's because it's like, you don't have a choice when you're in a place like when you grow up here, and then all of a sudden I'm in a place where there's guys walking with goats and like motorbikes zipping by, and just like such a difference. It's just my mind is thinking about life in the most different way, and it's kind of giving me insights. So I think it's like this beautiful perspective shift in a way that not many other things can do it so effortlessly.
Yeah, totally. And I'm interested, you talked about going to Nicaragua and spending time studying mindfulness. What was that experience like for you? Well, actually, before you get into that, how did you get there? Like, how did that cross your radar?
Yeah, so I remember meeting someone in Guatemala who told me about this spiritual community. And this was the first time, like I discovered a little bit about mindfulness at Ohio State because I did this workshop where we like, I remember like it was like my first mindfulness workshop, and I was not comfortable with mindfulness. And like I remember the professors like put like it was not a class, but it was like an extracurricular thing you could go to. He was like, guiding us to put a raisin on our tongue and like don't touch it, but like notice the raisin. Like I just remember this. I was like, this is so weird. But I remember leaving that like, and I was, struggling with such bad anxiety, and I left that thing feeling the most calm I had felt in so long. So that kind of sparked my interest. I started reading a ton when I got there about meditation, and I was just feeling drawn to this like mindful path. So I heard about this community in Nicaragua where it was like this, you dive into meditation every day and like learn about breath work, and it was like this kind of spiritual community. And to me, I'm like, that sounds amazing. So I reached out to the guy, the email of the community. It's called Inyanita. It's amazing. And he's like, yeah, come on over. So again, not having a phone, on the website, there's like 3 ways to get there. You can get a taxi for like $30 US, but for me that was way too much money because like I was on the most shoestring budget. So I of course take the long way. It takes me 2 hours to it's on an island in Nicaragua, Ometepe Island. So like I literally almost circled this one part of the island walking because I couldn't find it, and then this local kid on a bike like ended up like taking me like in behind his house like through these woods, and like I entered the back. So not the way you're supposed to do it, but I get there, and wow, it was one of the most. I was only there for 2 weeks, but it was one of the most transformational 2 weeks because every morning we'd wake up at 5:30, and just the whole way the community there's no trash. The only trash that I had was floss, and they like. With the trash, there's so little trash created. It's like completely self-sustaining the way they built it. It's all built out of cob, which is like this really sustainable material that's actually like seismic proof, so it can withstand earthquakes. It's made of like mud and
like
straw and a couple
stuff,
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually helped build a cob house in another place I was traveling, but so I learned a little bit about it and everything. So there was no meat either, so it was like it was vegetarian, plant-based, and I didn't really know anything about that lifestyle and just like gardening. Everything's from the plants and the trees. And so it's like this full, completely unlike anything I'd ever experienced. But then every morning at 5:30, we would do different like mindfulness or meditation and breath techniques. And again, in meditation, I thought you just sit with your arms crossed with your hands like this going hum or like, like I think it's like monks. Exactly. Like I didn't know. I thought, I just didn't really know. And it was like this intense breath work. I don't know if you're familiar with like holotropic breathing. That experience. Essentially what happened, and this was like what completely blew my mind one morning, is my hands locked like this. And it was almost like you entered this, you basically go like, you like inhale and exhale. Like you do it so much that your body gets into this rhythm and you kind of lose.
Well, it's like a psychedelic state.
Track. It really is.
Yeah.
It was like a psychedelic state and all self-induced naturally.
Yeah.
And we're like 30 minutes, I don't even know. I'd lose track of time. There's like music. We were like in this beautiful ashram overlooking a volcano on this jungleless island. And I'm just like breathing. All of a sudden I kind of like check back in and I don't know how much time goes, but like my hands are locked and I'm dripping in sweat. I'm like, holy shit. Like I'm paralyzed. Like it kind of like scared me. But it was like this, metaphor of what was I holding on to and what was like stopping me from kind of being fully free. And it was that experience that just opened the realm for me of because on the other side of it was it was like shavasana, or I always can't say that word, but in yoga, the last pose where you get to just like fly and just like be in the most euphoric state ever.
You pronounced it right.
It was, shavasana or savasana. I don't know. I always butcher it, but it was incredible. And like every morning you're having these different like 5 rhythms dance. So it's learning how to get the fruits of meditation in different ways. And so it was I had the most strong connection with myself, like truly myself. And I've never been able to like just sit with myself without all these thoughts, like thinking about them. And I read The Power of Now in that community. Yeah. So it was really learning about this whole thing of like relationship with self, and that, that I wasn't my thoughts, but I'm the guy or the spirit, whatever you want to call it, the thinker of the thoughts. And also this understanding of, I think I was scared of the person that I was becoming. Like when I was in high school or whatever, I always thought, I never understood people who are super happy for no reason. And like really like relaxed and calm. I was almost like scared of it. And I remember that day, I'll tell you that moment when my hands locked, it was through that holotropic breathing. It was so powerful. I remember journaling after, and it was like this realization that I was kind of done like I was a big partier in high school, and I was just scared to basically like just be myself and show that self to other people, and noticing that my interests were changing, and I was so excited about like mindfulness and learning and
Yeah.
meditation and accepting that like this is who I'm becoming. And it was like this interesting realization that being blissful and peaceful and being calm and happy about nothing is actually the best thing ever. And it's 10 times better than being anxious and like trying all these other things. So that experience there, and it was a lot of like just connection. Like I remember we would have sharing circle on Wednesdays,
Mm.
and at first it was uncomfortable. It was like, imagine you're like this close to someone's face, and
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to hold their hands and not say anything for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this? But just being comfortable as people, and it's like, it's almost like I felt like at that community, they're just peeling all these walls and layers that had built up over time, back to the essence of just being a human. And I know that can sound like a little woo-woo, but it really is what
No,
it
it
felt like.
makes so much sense to me. And yeah, again, we've walked a similar path in some ways. You just are on an accelerator. I've done a lot of work like that. And yeah, I think somehow we've gotten disconnected from a lot of these very, very basic things that make us feel connected to our humanness, and this need to like constantly be doing rather than being, and needing to prove ourselves rather than just like accepting each other and being with each other. And a lot of that's gotten lost. And it's exciting to see more and more people discovering that and having those experiences and talking about it. And I'm curious, as you move through, as you go and talk, are most people like, what are you talking about? That sounds really weird. Or are a lot of people like, wow, that sounds really cool. I want to try something like that.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think it was surprising at first. Like I remember my first speech being kind of scared because I was 19 speaking in front of 2,000 high school kids at where I had graduated from high school. So like
Wow.
some of the kids are like 18. It's not like I'm older. I'm just like peer to peer.
Yeah.
It was like the first time I'd ever openly talked about anxiety, my depression, and sharing some of these things. And I was really surprised because like I was also trying to distance myself, but again, I was like, I remember those kids, and it was like there's like the quote unquote like the cool kids, and then
Sure.
these kids and these kids, but there was kids from all those different groups who were like genuinely interested. And I remember like having a conversation with someone who I remember from high school I would never think was interested, and was like asking me questions about living on the ashram. I was like, whoa, like this is cool. So I think it really is something that people are receptive to, and especially when someone is in a place that they're lost or confused or something's not working, I think it is an amazing time to be introduced, because whatever was previously worked is maybe not working anymore, and that's okay. And there's this other amazing vehicle that's available to you at all times,
Yeah.
and you can always go to it. And I think that for kids who are struggling, it's just the whole idea of mindfulness and being in touch with yourself it just allows you to understand a bigger picture, and to know that all the external things, although they seem like a big deal, and not to deny them, that they are real for your experience, but there's like the deep core of you. And so I think when kids hear maybe this like out there experience, they're actually open to it because they know that there is something there that could really serve them if they're interested in it.
Is that still a part of your sort of personal practice, that you integrate mindfulness and meditation and breathing techniques and stuff into your daily life?
Yeah, so I haven't been doing the breath work as much, but actually my mentor in Toastmasters was a monk for 10 years, and he
Cool.
teaches, it's called transformative breathing, and I would go to him every Monday. He called it like therapy for your mind and body, but without a therapist, because it's every time you'd leave that place and you're just like, whoa, like I'd always have a realization like the week after. But I surf at least every day, even when there was no waves today, and I just have to. For me, like just being in the ocean is the most. It's like a meditative experience for me. But I do a lot of guided. I do a 10-minute guided meditation every day.
Nice. I've heard that about surfing. I've never tried it. I think I need to.
Yeah, it's like the one thing that I think I'm addicted to, other than like avocados, and it's just this feeling of, it's an addiction that I'm willing to have. It's
Yeah.
just, it's like a very blissful experience.
I'm a little scared of sharks, but maybe one
You
day.
have a higher chance of being killed by a coconut than a shark.
Really?
A much higher chance.
A
Yeah, a
coconut.
coconut falling on you.
Okay,
Yep.
that's good to know.
And getting in the car is much more dangerous than surfing. So
Yeah, okay. That
I
actually
think
makes a
Jaws,
lot of
I
sense.
think Jaws might have left a couple of people scared of the ocean.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my God, I wouldn't even go in a swimming pool after that, which made no sense, but it was just like
Just
water.
water. Sharks.
Yeah. So, goodness. Okay, so kind of taking it back to like looking at people that are currently sort of struggling with some of these issues like purposelessness, anxiety, and regardless of their age, what do you think is sort of the first step? And you kind of outlined a few things earlier, but like let's say you're like a 30-year-old person and you're in a dead-end job and you're kind of used to being like part of the system. How do you start to break out of that if you know that it's not doing it for you, but that's been your whole life? What do you say to somebody
I
like
think
that?
I really think the first thing is full authentic acknowledgement of your feelings. Like it's easy to say that, but to truly like what is that job doing to you? Like how is it making you feel? What do you really want? And I know those questions can be simple, but the question of like what do you want? Like a lot of us, and I remember for me it was like I'd so thrown that out the table of thinking what I should do that the question of like what do you truly desire can take 7,000 times to ask for you to get the answer.
Yeah.
But the first thing is just like allowing yourself to acknowledge that you're unhappy and like letting it out and feeling it and writing or saying to someone like I don't like this job, it makes me feel this, I don't like doing this, and then not putting judgment behind it. I think that's just like the permission to freely express every single thing you feel about yourself, the situation, and then the second part would be compassion, especially if there are like a lot of negative self-talk, which I remember when I was making the shift, I felt like I was just so mean to myself. I would never say what I would say to myself to other people. So it's like the acknowledgement, and then with the self-compassion to just like knowing you're a human being. Tons of people have transitioned and hated their jobs and done it for years and made a shift.
Yeah.
And if they've done it, knowing you can too, and not putting so much pressure on yourself to have it figured out tomorrow, knowing that there's going to be a timeline and figuring out the game plan. That's all like steps 4, 5, and 6. But first, letting it out, being compassionate with yourself, and then ideally, I think finding someone to talk to about it is really good, and they don't have to be like a professional. I mean, if you have access to like a therapist or someone who can help you like mapping these steps, amazing. If not, even just talking with a friend or someone who could be receptive is great. And if you don't have that, there's YouTube and there's other videos that can help you find your life. Like the Live Your Legend community helps people align their vocation with their passion and purpose. So there's all these resources that you can find. And then it's also this feeling of best case, worst case. So really outlining what's the worst thing that could happen. If you left your job, how much money do you need to live on X? Can you, figure out a way to, if your biggest thing was like you wanted to travel, for example, you're 30 and you could figure out a way to either like sublease for your living or do something where you could even get away for like 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, everyone has done something remarkable. So like there's literally everything is possible. And then just trying something and not maybe having such pressure on what the outcome is going to be. I think there's this huge pressure to like find and live your purpose, which I think is beautiful and amazing to be doing that, but to not have so much pressure on needing to have it figured out and having to be like a 23-year-old millionaire who's got 9 billion followers and your own brand, you know what I mean? Like there's no one who's keeping track and no one's on a race. Like we're all in this individual experience. So just again, having compassion of your timeline and not, but also being conscious of the fact that life is precious and feeling the pain enough to like make a decision that's going to alter your path. Because, in reality, it's the decision that maybe you're accustomed to a job for 10 years or 20 years. And of course, there's the conditioning there of that job's, been providing safety, but really getting clear on what are the worst cases that can happen, and like writing, okay, first write every bad thing that could happen, like, oh, well, that probably wouldn't happen. Oh, this is an easy fix. I'll just ask my neighbor to watch my dog or like
Right.
do a little dog vacay or one of those things. I think that's truly the biggest thing that holds 99% of people back.
Yeah.
Is the fear of change is way worse than the actual change itself.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing you touched on too that I think is really, really prevalent is sort of unhappiness guilt. Like if you have a job that pays well, or you have good benefits, or you have good coworkers or something like that, but it's still not doing for you. I hear this a lot. And, mostly I work with women. I don't know if this is quite as prevalent for men, but it's like, oh, I should be happy here. This should be doing it for me, and it's not. And why isn't it? And they make it mean something about them, like, oh, there's something wrong with me that I'm not happy, rather than maybe this just isn't the right fit. And that doesn't mean that my company's bad or my job is bad. It's just not for me. And I think that's a really difficult thing for people to suss out sometimes.
It really is. And I mean, the first thing, and this is like whenever I hear the word should, it's like buzzer goes off. And it's easy when you're talking with someone else. Like I'll hear someone say, oh, like I feel like I should be doing it. And I'm like, dude, you've said should 7 times. What do you want? But when you're doing it, and I do this myself, but it's easier to catch in someone else than to catch in yourself.
Yeah.
So I can talk about this because I literally had this breakthrough this week where I'm like, I feel like I work with someone I literally love and I'm learning so much from. I'm in a business that's doing super well, but we're in this like business mastermind and it's just like all about scale and growth. And we just came to this realization that why are we even like, what is this purpose of all of this to get to?
Yeah.
And for me, it was this, like, that conversation came later, but it was first, I was like guilty of wanting more. And it's like this reminder that I'm not here to live like I am worthy. Really, if we followed the trickle of where each question led with this coach, it came down to me not giving myself permission. And, and maybe deep down not thinking that I'm truly worthy of going after what I truly desire. And so there's this book called The Big Leap, by this guy, Gay Hendricks. I don't know. Have you read The Big Leap?
I haven't.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. And I've never ever read, I'm a total junkie in self-development stuff, but I've never read anything like his because he really talks about how we like self-sabotage ourselves, like when things go well.
Yeah.
And he has this mantra that's like, I radiate abundant success and love as I inspire others to do the same. And why I love that mantra is because it's giving you permission to live your best life and knowing that, sometimes I would feel like, oh, I don't want to share. I've shared tons when things aren't going well. Like I love being raw because it's just my truth. But then when things are going well, I would be like, well, I don't want to share it going well because I don't want people to like feel bad about themselves. But it's like, no, you living your best life is going to inspire other people to do their best. And even if you make someone jealous, it's all a reflection, it's projections. So even me, like I've been jealous of people and then thanked them because they made me realize they had something that I didn't have that I wanted.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's all a choice of how we choose to see it. But for me, what I've been saying when I realized that, I'm like, well, am I worthy of a life where I can love what I do, love who I'm with, love how I feel, and have all the pieces of the pie, like truly having it all? And the answer is yes. And I'm exploring this part of me that for whatever reason is having trouble giving myself permission to have those things. And luckily, with my business partner, we had this very raw and vulnerable conversation, and it turned out that he was feeling the same exact way about the business. He wasn't enjoying his day to day, and so now we're like both gonna align it to where we get to do things we enjoy more. But it started with literally acknowledging. It's so funny, and then like not judging our feelings about it, but just acknowledging it and then speaking the truth. And then now we've made this shift. I forget what the initial question was.
I
But
don't remember either, but that's amazing. Well, I think it had
yeah.
to do with like job, like, or unhappiness guilt.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
unhappiness guilt. So I mean, I think at the end of the day, like on the deep down subconscious level, it's like a worthiness question. And the answer is yes, of course you are worthy of having it. So it's maybe identifying maybe why you're not giving yourself permission or what maybe is standing in the way. And of course that's, for me, I'm still like sitting with the reason why, but I think becoming aware of, oh, this is the reason. Because at first I was like, well, I don't want to make Taylor, who's my mentor and business partner, I don't want, like, because my fear was that if I expressed to him that I wasn't happy in this phase, then everything's going to fall apart. We're going to be on our own way. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, that was a beautiful year and learning. But it wasn't like that at all. And by expressing this, now it's like the opportunity to get to do that. But it wasn't actually about him. It was also about me giving myself permission to want the things that I want. Because I like, again, I kept thinking it was about him, not wanting to hurt him or affect him. But it's also, do I believe I'm worthy of having it all, doing the business and loving every moment? Now, there's the shit sandwich in every job, but like loving
Right.
more so like waking up. Like when I wrote my book, I would jump out of bed at 5:30 and take a cold shower and do my meditation and write. I wouldn't turn my phone on until 10 a.m. every morning. And I was so I have the experience of being 1,000,000% driven. And I think this is really interesting is because it's not to compare. It's not that everything I'm doing or was doing was wrong. It's just I know in my being what it's like to be so aligned on a mission that I still, to this day, I haven't felt that same spark that I had there. And again, not to judge it, but I know what it's like to be in full flow and in full alignment from a work purpose perspective.
Sure.
And that's been missing a little bit lately. So it's, again, giving myself not judging the feeling of being better or worse, but just having that knowledge. I'm like, well, I've tapped into this before and it's not there right now. So am I going to allow myself to create the space to allow that into my life again? And, maybe it happens tomorrow, maybe in a year, but like at least giving myself permission to go for it because I know inherently what stokes a fire in my soul. It's a feeling. Although I can come up with a million reasons and blocks of, but this, but the things that make you forget to eat and poop, and when you lose track of time, and your eyes light up, and someone's like, "Dude, wow, you just lit up." It's like pay attention to when those three things happen, and I feel like that's just like the answer inherently within.
Yeah. Speaking my language for sure. One thing you touched on so briefly, and I think it's actually such a cool thing to talk about, is the idea of jealousy being a gift and showing you something. And you kind of like gloss over that. Would you be willing to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So like the first guy who inspired me to basically travel was this guy, Jake Ducey, who's like a friend and a mentor. And at first it was like inspiration, but there was also this jealousy. I'm like, wow, like he got to like, he's a speaker now and he's writing and he traveled and wrote a book about it. And I was like, I want to do that. And then it's like, wait, I can do that. And then I did do that. And then in other ways, it's someone like, I'm trying to think of someone like in the moment. I feel like sometimes I'll see someone who's, I want to give you like a tangible example. Like here's someone who I kind of felt a little jealous is this YouTube group called like Yes Theory. And there's 4 dudes who they just basically pursue authentic and experiences that challenge them, that take them out of their comfort zone, like really audacious things, everything from like trying to meet like Elon Musk to having like breakfast with the Prime Minister of Canada, like which they did. I was like, what is it about these guys that made me jealous? One of the things I realized, and this was like a year and a half ago, I didn't have my social life was so bad. All my friends were in college. I was like 20-year-old kid who had I had been in this cave like writing my book and like cared so much, and I had a lot of loneliness, and I would just kind of fuel that pang of loneliness like into the mission. But it got to this point I was like, I literally just like want to have friends. Like it's like I was very
Yeah.
social like growing up, but I just like didn't have that many friends. And I was like, the videos of these four dudes having so much fun. Like, what is it there? I'm like, oh, part of it is like I just want to hang out with friends and like have fun again. I became so serious about my mission and all these things. And so it was like, sitting with that, why are these guys making me jealous? Oh, and then that kind of led to me finding a way to go to Israel for free, where I lived with like 30 people my age for 2 months. And that was exactly like what my soul needed. And then funny enough, it was like in Israel where I, like all my whole story is just like the last 3 years is this continuous embracing uncertainty, but like each step would appear. So that was that thing that really, I think fulfilled me. And still to this day, it's like, I actually believe that jealousy is a gift because it shows something that we're actually seeking. And it's, maybe it won't happen right away, but if we can sit with it, it's like, oh, maybe I consciously want more of this in my life. And it's like a nice little navigator.
Yeah, For me, it's been a way for me to see where I've been inauthentic in a way, because I think it's like something that, and I've actually kind of fallen away from this a little bit, but music was a big part of my life, and I would watch these videos online of girls like singing and playing instruments, and I would notice that same thing, and I was like, oh, I'm just not sharing my gifts, I'm not sharing my talents. And so I started doing that, and it's transformed into other things, and now like doing podcasts and but I think seeing other people sharing made me jealous, and it forced me to look at, okay, I'm actually not authentically sharing myself. And it was a huge gift. Uncomfortable, of course, at first, but not a negative thing at all.
At first you're like, well, this person got lucky or whatever. They're like, oh wait, it's like at first, jealousy is jealousy.
That's cool. So what's next for you? What are you up to?
So living in Encinitas, and excited to kind of so what we do, again, we help land like leaders and world changers TED Talks and help them spread it, and just kind of made a big realization in the last week of like really wanting to focus. Taylor's he speaks a lot about social good because he's built 2 social good companies, and we both just came to this realization that we both really want to be able to pursue our own individual speaking, which for me, the thing that lights me up more than anything is just articulating the human experience. And whether that's writing or speaking, I feel like that's just my gift and something that is a big vehicle for impact, and I just love doing it. So like creating that space in our business to not necessarily scale, but to support my vision as me speaking and support Taylor's vision and him speaking. So we have the business, which we love, and then creating that space. And for me, just pursuing, I'm just kind of obsessed with like new experiences. So, just trying new things, learning from people that inspire me, surfing and travel. The cool thing is that we can run the business online. So we spent a while in Costa Rica just surfing and eating mangoes and working.
Nice.
And so, looking where else we'll go. Taylor, we're going to be going to Amsterdam, which is exciting because Taylor just got a big gig there. So I haven't been to Europe in a while, so I'm excited to get to spend some time there. And
cool. Have you ever been to Burning Man?
No, I've been to Lightning in a Bottle.
Nice. That's fun.
So high up on my list, Burning Man.
I feel like after talking to you, I think you would like it a lot.
I'm laughing because I've had like 3 people tell me that in the last like 2 weeks.
It's a message. Maybe you got to listen.
Yeah.
Very cool. If somebody wanted to see you speak, what would that look like? Do you have to be in high school or college?
No, not. I mean, I've spoken at various things from like travel events to mental health, like NAMI stuff to, I think my like kind of bread and butter, if you would say, is like in the college university, just because the age I think is really good. But yeah, I mean, anything really aligned with mental health, specifically anxiety, and then like intuition. I mean, I love following your intuition, but like kind of creating your purpose or finding a meaningful career, getting started on that. Those are kind of like and then building a business is something I've learned a lot in the year of building a business that can like serve your lifestyle and, ideally check the boxes to make you happy that can like serve what you want to do, for which a lot of me is surfing and travel. So those are
Nice.
like the three things that I feel very confident and truly love talking about.
That's so wonderful. So again, I will be posting links to all of Jake's articles, his website, TED Talk, all of that. You guys definitely need to go check it out. Thank you so, so much. This was super fun talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Time literally just flew
I
by.
know. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Jake. So